Hello YouTubers, welcome to yet another update video about my DIY battery tab welder. I'll do another update because I seem to be getting loads and loads of questions about it. Apparently I wasn't explicit enough before, so I'm using this video to answer some of the most asked questions on the videos. I'll just take you through the setup again. It has changed slightly from the last one. I've upgraded the battery, and also swapped around the switch, and these rods, these electrodes, are upgraded as well, which I'll show you what they are in a minute. But basically, this is the setup. So we have a negative terminal here on this particular battery. It's the other way around to what I had before. So we have negative terminal. We have the positive terminal. Off of the positive terminal comes a copper bar, which just connects to the side of the relay. Any side of the relay is fine, doesn't matter, because all the relay doing is literally bridging the connection between this terminal and this terminal inside here. So yeah, it doesn't matter which way around these go, and also it doesn't matter which way around these wires go, which is these are the 12-volt feed to this solenoid here. Okay, so as soon as you put 12 volts onto this solenoid, the coil will activate and the switch will basically just go and close the terminal. And as soon as you take off the 12 volts, it springs back again. And this can happen really, really quickly, which is ideal for this particular application. Now, so coming off of the solenoid, we have this 16mm squared, pretty solid core copper cable coming from the positive. That goes to this, what we call in England a Choc box, but it's just basically an electrical connector. They come in strips. They can be sort of yay long. You just cut off the ones how long you want them to be. And then underneath, on this side, we have 2 copper rods screwed in to these terminals, and that's what actually makes the connection on the nickel strips. And if we just go back over to this side, so we've got the negative coming off of here and going down to this side. So what happens is when you bridge the connection, it basically shorts the battery. Okay, so literally you have all the current that the battery can provide going through this cable, down through the nickel strip and back up through that cable. It does not penetrate the cell. It literally just does not penetrate the cell. It hits the surface and it comes back straight back out again, back up through the copper rod. So it does not damage the 18650 cell or any particular cell that you want to weld with nickel strips. You can do it with double A's, you can do it with triple A's, you can do it with anything like that. That's absolutely fine. So the switch setup for the solenoid is as follows. Okay, so at the moment this particular solenoid has a red cable and that's green and yellow, I think. So I assume that the red will be positive and the green and yellow will be negative, or ground. I suppose green and yellow is normally ground. So what I have done is I have hooked the red wire coming out of the solenoid. Okay, you can see that here. I've hooked that directly to the positive terminal of the battery. So the positive is constantly connected. So then we take the negative wire, okay, coming from the solenoid feed, 12-volt feed, and that comes down here, swaps over into this yellow cable because the wire wasn't long enough, and that will go down here, down here, down here, and it goes eventually to one side of this switch, okay, and then the other side will come back down this cable here and go up to the negative. Now all you're doing is you're breaking with this switch the negative connection. So at the moment, because that switch isn't pressed, there's no negative feed going to this solenoid. At the moment, it's always got positive, but the negative isn't. So as soon as you press this button and bridge that gap with the switch, you'll get the solenoid clicking, which turns it on. Okay, and as you can hear, you can do it very quickly. So that's an on off, on off, on off. It's very quick, and you can. These are perfectly fine to handle and touch. There's no current coming through that until you hit that switch. Even if you do hit that switch, you can still touch the wires because it has to touch something metal to actually bridge this gap here, and this is where the kind of arc comes into play, and that's where the weld happens. Now, what I've done here, I've upgraded my battery from last time. I don't know if you can see, but this is a still a 12 volt. It's 35 amp hour. That doesn't matter, but it is 330 amps. Okay, which is the cold cranking amps from this battery. And what it means by cold cranking is that when you have this in a car and you switch the ignition on, what that does is it turns, obviously, the starter motor. The starter motor will then turn your flywheel, and that can take quite a lot of force to be able to do that. So the starter motor needs a lot of amps to go through it to be able to give it the torque to turn the motor. And that's what happens, is all of those amps get put through to the motor, and you know, you suck. Starting a car, you probably suck, well, on this one you probably suck 200 or odd amps, 250 amps to actually start a car. But it is really only for like a few seconds, because once your engine's turning over, your starter motor is drawing a lot less current. It's just basically turning and turning and turning. So it's the initial turn that really pulls the amps, and that's where this comes into play, because it's a very quick short circuit. Actually, you are basically shorting the battery. Now, it's absolutely fine. This is a sealed battery, okay? So there's no fumes to worry about or anything like that. And when we talk about fumes with lead acid batteries, it's actually when you charge them they produce the toxic fumes, not when you discharge them or when they're just sitting there. So if you're discharging them, i.e. using them, they do not produce any toxic chemicals. It's only when you're charging them. So that myth dispelled. We need to talk about this particular switch. Now, a few people have asked me, how on earth are you getting all that current to go through that switch? Now, we've obviously just covered that. That switch doesn't have all the current going through it. The switch powers the solenoid. The solenoid then bridges the terminals, and all the current passes through the solenoid and these cables and these copper rods. Now, with the battery, you can't go lower than 200 amps, 200 CCA, because you just won't get a proper weld. It just won't happen. You need at least 200. Now, I did say in my previous video and in some of the comments that you could go from 200 to say 600, but actually, being on this 330 amp battery, when I first started doing it with just clicking the switch in my hand, it was too long, and it was actually frying some of the nickel. It was just welding straight through it, blasting straight through it with a few sparks, which is why I've had to now mount the switch here, because then I can get a very quick switch, bridge, short, whatever. And that enables me now to use a higher amp rated battery, i.e. 330 rather than 200 with these particular welds. I wouldn't, judging by this experience now, I wouldn't recommend going above 400 amps, because I think it's too much to deal with. I did try an 800 amp battery, and again, that was just way too much to deal with. time of the weld wires or time of the switch wires, and what it did to the actual nickel. It was just too many amps basically. Now the amp hour of the battery doesn't matter at all. There's no resemblance to whether or not this battery can do the welds, so don't worry about that. As I say, this particular one is 12 volt, 35 amp hour, 330 cca, which it says 330A there, which is amps that it can pull. Now I did try, I don't know if you saw my last video, but I did try the little DC timer switch for the solenoid, and unfortunately I had that on its lowest setting it could possibly happen. It was like point something of a second, and that was too long. It didn't work, so I'm back to the manual switch, unfortunately. That's just some packs I've glued up, ready to be welded. I'll show you an example in a minute. Now, when you weld, you use nickel or nickel strips. You can use copper, but nickel is what I prefer. And these particular strips, I buy them in rolls. I mean, I've got a roll here, or the end of a roll there. And this one is 0.15 millimeters by, I think they're 10 or 12 mil. I'm not sure, but you can get them on eBay. I'll have a link to the to my supplier, who I found to be the only pure nickel strip supplier on eBay. Almost all of the other suppliers of nickel strips are an alloy rather than actual pure nickel, and what they would do is if they get any water or condensation inside your battery pack, they will actually corrode eventually. So you don't want that. That's why you use pure nickel, and you won't get any corrosion whatsoever. Now I just cut these to the size of the actual, I'm making a 4p pack here. There's 10s 4p, so I just cut those, trim off the edges so it makes it a bit neater, and weld them to the batteries. Now just going back to one thing about the solenoid, this particular one is from a scooter, a 50cc scooter, and it's rated for 150 amps. Now I know eventually this particular solenoid is going to go. Is the contacts won't be able to handle the current for a very long time. So I'll either get another one and you have it as a kind of disposable piece, or what I would suggest you do is get a higher rated amp solenoid. I've seen them 200, 250 amps, so I would get one of those and use that instead. But this is just what I had at the time, and I haven't really changed much, really. Now, I'll put a link to the solenoid in the description as well. I got that from eBay. Well, I got that one from my scooter, but I've got another one that I got from eBay. They're exactly the same. So I butchered my scooter for that one. Now, I've been asked how often I charge the main battery, the 12 volt battery. And to be honest, my last battery, I didn't charge at all. I got it charged and I did hundreds and hundreds of welds and didn't charge it, and it was still fine. This battery I've only done probably, I don't know, 100, 150 welds, and it's still pretty much on the same voltage it was when I bought it. So you can do a lot of welds before you have to actually charge the battery. But, you know, maybe just put it on charge every week or a couple of weeks or something like that, just top it up. Now, a lot of people are worried about, or seem worried about the actual switch terminals in the solenoid getting stuck welded together as well. Now, the coil in there and the spring are very powerful, and bear in mind it has to deal with the cranking over of an engine as well, so it's used to pulling that amount of amps through the terminals. So it's very unlikely that they'll actually weld together. And someone said, what about if you weld the battery and these terminals get stuck on the battery and the solenoid gets stuck, and you're just stuck in a constant short. Now the thing is that happens, it's very easy to just move the battery and these terminals will just break contact with the nickel. Either that or the nickel will actually just burn up and blow, because it is basically a fuse. This nickel strip is rated for about 40 amps of electrical current coming through the battery. Now that's a continuous current, so if this gets like 100, 200, whatever for a period of time, more than a split second, it will just melt and disintegrate, and so that will break the connection anyway. So that's a kind of safety fuse there for anything sinister. And also the battery, when you short it, it's not going to blow up. People are saying it's going to blow up in your face. It's ridiculous. Think about it. When you crank over the engine of a car, what you're doing is you're actually shorting the battery, because both of the terminals, all the current goes to this motor, and it's actually the electricity that gets generated for the electromagnetism. That is actually a battery short. Every time you use a battery, you're shorting it, because you're connecting the positive and the negative to something, and that is generating your electricity, and it's basically shorting it. When you connect a battery to, say, a light bulb, that goes through the filament. The filament is the short. That is basically what's happening. It's every time you use a battery, you are shorting the battery. So shorting this particular battery for a split second is perfectly fine. It's absolutely fine, and it's safe. So stop being safety, whatchamacallits. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few spot welds and just give you an example of how easy it is and what I do. So I just flatten this out a little bit so it's a bit easier to put down. Okay, now I'm doing this with the camera in front of my face, so it might be a bit tricky. So all I'll do is I will put this strip exactly where I want it to go, first of all. Then make sure that these terminals are fairly close together and both electrodes are touching the nickel. I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on that. Now all I'll do is I'll just press that very quickly, and that has done a perfect weld. That's strong, that's going to stay there, and I'll just generally do 2 on each. But that's just one there, that's fine, it doesn't matter. So then I'll just go to this one, do exactly the same, and you see with my button press that it's very, very quick. That's all you need. That's all you need to do. Now the battery I had before was lower amp, and I was able to do that with just in my fingers. But with this one, I've had to mount it here so that I could do it very, very quickly. You can see how quick the solenoid is actually, coming on and off. Now, if you look at those, they're absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with these welds at all. They're good. They'll do the job, and they are pretty strong. You can't get those off. The nickel's going to bend before I get those off. So you can see that it's very easy, very quick to do. You're not doing anything. It's not getting hot. The battery's not hot. These wires, after a few welds, do get a bit warm because obviously they've got a lot of current passing through them, and so do these. Oh, I haven't told you about these. These are slightly upgraded from what I had before. They were lengths of 2.1 mil twin and earth cable, and they're quite flexible. But these, you'll love this. These are copper slate nails. Okay, and all I've done is taken two for this particular one. And all you do is you've got this little head on there, which we need to get rid of because we need to put it up here and into that terminal and screw it down. So you just take your pliers, okay, squeeze, get rid of the head. Simple. Oh, focus, focus, you bastard, focus. There we go. Alright, and then all you need to do is, if these die down, like these are getting a bit blunt at the moment, but they're okay still, there's nothing wrong with those. But when they started off, they were nice and pointy like this one here. So, just unscrew this, standard flat screwdriver, unscrew that, take the other one out, put this one back in, and screw it up, and you're done, basically. That is it. And these copper nails cost me, I think it was about £5 for 125 grams worth, which I don't know how many are in there, but they're 40mm long. You can get away with shorter ones if you want, but not too short, because you want some to be able to stick out of there, to be able to sort of move them close together. But that's all you need. Copper nails. That's pure copper as well, not copper alloy. That won't work very well. You want pure copper. And so that's pretty much it, basically. You've got your welded strips here. Oh, let's do another one, shall we? Okay. Now you might see some sparks coming from it. It's not a problem. Sometimes that happens. So I'll just get it in the right position. Sometimes what happens is I don't put both these terminals onto the battery, and you do get a bit of an arc, which isn't ideal. Kind of bright in your face. A way to get around that, I would imagine, what would be really good is if I could actually put these spring mounted. So I could just sort of push it down on something, and both of them would spring and touch the right place, rather than have it like this, because I kind of had to manipulate it slightly just so that I make sure that they're both touching the terminals. Now, as you can see, it's not a lengthy process, it's quite quick. I've got to get a bobble on that button so I don't keep hitting the side. And oh, this is a spark there, so it wasn't quite touching properly on one side, which will probably be this side, because that's not done as well. And then you see another strip welded, and that's gonna last and stay together. Thanks for watching the video. I hope this has covered everything that you had a question about. And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I've got more different videos coming, different videos about electric skateboards, which I'm really into at the moment, and building different electrical items. And I've also got one video coming which actually shows you I breathed a bit of life into this little Dremel wannabe by use of one of these 18650 batteries. So yeah, that video is coming soon. But yeah, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video.